Welcome back, Internet. Blaine here with the InfinitelyGalactic project. And today what I'm going to be doing is just showing you around how I've set up the Ubuntu 20.04 desktop that is running the show these days, and comment on some of the things that I really like about Ubuntu 20.04 and some of the things that I'm still struggling with. So again, this is a very casual, old school screencast, record and rant type video. So for all the hardcore Linux people out there, I'm going to be moving pretty quick, and I'm going to do my best to cover my thoughts. I've got a huge long list of them here, so this could go for a while. So strap in, enjoy the ride, and we'll see how we go. So Ubuntu 20.04, it came out a while back now. So before we go any further, we need to talk about the Linux kernel itself, because that's where it all begins. But what I would love to say is that this particular kernel, while I'm just installing NeoFetch here in the background, this particular kernel is a wonderful addition to have here on the Ubuntu 20.04 long-term support release. Now, kernel releases in and of themselves have become a little bit more irrelevant as time has gone on because of the hardware enablement stack that the team at Canonical provide. Having said that though, it is the reason why I love the fact that the kernel 5.4 is here is for a couple of reasons. First of all, the power management, thermal control, fan curves, all of that kind of thing just seems so much better with this particular kernel, and without being privy to all the information that has come from the kernel team, what I hear anecdotally around the place is that the kernel 5.4 has had a significant amount of work done for power management and all that's related to it. So whether it's CPU scaling and thermals and all of that fun stuff, this kernel is great to have. Now also it brings the WireGuard VPN access, or VPN support, I guess, which I'm not personally using it, so I'm not going to comment on it. I'm going to leave it there. The other thing that I'm stoked to see is GNOME 3.36. Obviously the GNOME shell has undergone lots of iteration over the years, and here on Ubuntu 20.04 it makes a huge difference, and it leads to a much more performant desktop, obviously, and it is palpable, the difference in frame rates and the difference in smoothness and all that good stuff. And there are a lot less CPU spikes than in previous releases of GNOME, so you see usually a lot more leveled out process line. Now, as obviously I'm recording a screencast here at 60 frames a second, so this is not exactly reliable information, but in day-to-day use it just feels so much more predictable what the experience that you're getting. And it also helps when it comes to the battery life side of things. Okay, now let's start talking about what have I done to actually set this place up. So first of all, I did install, or I did enable Live Patch, and that just installs some updates in the background without you having to restart, so that's nice. I also installed the Slimbook battery tool, which I have disabled when I'm plugged in, but you do have pre-built energy efficient profiles that these are built by the team that sell the Slimbook, and they've just made it available for anyone to go and install. I guess I urge caution in some ways because in the past these power management tools like TLP and Slimbook, which uses a lot of the TLP tools, can be a little bit unpredictable sometimes, especially when it comes to Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and reconnecting after sleep and all that kind of stuff. So far, I've had no issues, and this particular tool does a great job at limiting animations and other things that might eat up CPU cycles when you're on battery. Now, the other thing that I did was with Firefox, traditionally what I love to do is jump down into the into the customize section and disable the title bar so that I get all of the headers, the tabs, and the window controls all in the one thing. I love the Yarrow theming, the updates that the team at Canonical have done, and everything that I'm hearing from Martin Winpress and the rest of them is that the Yarrow theme, they're all really proud of it, and I think it looks great. I have used the dark variant, I've used the light variant. At the moment I'm on standard, but it changes from day to day, and the fact I can do that really easily through the appearance settings here is amazing. Now, some other changes that I did make before was auto hiding the dock. I've disabled that for now because it just wasn't working out for the work that I was doing, but I do appreciate the fact that that toggle is there and it will just dodge any windows that you throw up next to it, which is great to see. Also, quick controls to be able to put the position of the dock itself is also great. I've dropped the icon size down to 32 just to give myself a little bit more screen real estate. And while I did install GNOME Tweaks, which is the tool that you can use to tweak different bits about the GNOME shell or the desktop environment that we're in here, there is also the Tweaks app, the extensions app itself, which I believe comes by default. And you can very easily enable or disable various extensions right here. It's a great admittance in some ways from the GNOME desktop that we need extensions in order to make GNOME Shell what we want it. And this is not a far cry from what it was when GNOME Shell started, but it's great to see that flexibility and these different extensions are being embraced and given a simple, polished user interface to interact with them. So it's all good stuff. Now, the other thing that I have done is enabled some app indicators. I don't know, honestly, if they were there by default or whether I had to turn them on, but there is, as you can see here in extensions, there's the Ubuntu app indicators. It's turned on. I think it might be turned on by default, but I just thought I'd mention it. Now, the other thing is that multi-touch gestures are something that I use all the time, and I love using them. So what I ended up going with was a application called Fusuma, I think that's how you say it. Basically, it involves doing a little bit of work in the back end to set it up, and I'll put a link in the description for how to set it up. I'm not going to go through it here in this video, but I've found Fusuma to be the most reliable. I did try using the gestures tool that has been talked about elsewhere, but Fusuma for me really works. So whether it's multi-finger back and forward support in the Firefox browser itself, I can 3-finger swipe forwards and back in a tab, or I can swipe 3 fingers up to go to the overview panel, or I can swipe 4 fingers down to minimize all the windows and just return to the desktop itself. I can move around different workspaces, all using gestures, which I think is an important thing to have in 2020 with a laptop that supports multiple gestures. So again, I'll put some links in the description for how to enable that yourself. The other thing I experimented with was focus on hover. So in Tweaks, when it comes to jumping between different windows and wanting to be able to focus on a particular window, there is a setting that you can enable here in Tweaks under Windows to say focus on hover. And what this will do is that it'll highlight the window that you hover your mouse over, as opposed to the window that you have clicked on last. Now, the application for this is that if you are jumping between two different windows and you have them tiled side by side, then simply mousing over and typing will then start entering that in on that window rather than always having to click. Now, when you don't have a mouse set up next to you, this is actually a lot of help, because let's say you have a web page that you're typing in and you also have a terminal that you're wanting to type in, and being able to just flick the cursor on your trackpad from one window to the other is, I don't know, in my mind, it's less effort than doing the Alt-Tab thing. I don't know. Anyway, I had it open for a while I was setting up this machine, and then I disabled it once I was done because you find it annoying depending on who you are. But what I did want to point out is the fact that the difference in the theme changes that you'll notice up the top here on the header bars are pretty significant. So it does feel a little bit jarring to pull yourself in and out, especially when your mouse is flying around. So focus on hover for the hardcore, but if you're the hardcore, you've probably already got a tiling window manager and you don't care about whatever I'm saying. So the other things that I did was that I needed to do in order to make Fusuma, which is the multi-touch gestures, work, is that I did have to go ahead and install Git and Make and GCC so that I could clone into the GitHub repository and grab that source code and install it. It was a very simple, straightforward process. And like I mentioned, the battery optimizer here from Slimbook does give you a lot of options here to customize what your different power profiles look like. There is a lot of power packed into this tool, so can't recommend it enough. And I so far have had no issues with it. I know I should have showed that earlier, but I just skipped over it in my notes, so I looped back around to it. Now, the other thing that's kind of weird in Ubuntu 20.04, and I don't know why it keeps happening, but whenever I log in or whenever the desktop boots, I'll always get a pop-up notification saying that my wireless printer has been detected and that it's been connected. I don't know why it keeps showing up, and I've tried to disable it. One of the things that I did was if you go to the notifications settings in GNOME settings, you can disable lock screen notifications. I find that it doesn't work for booting, but after you have booted for the first time, it will disable that from popping up again. The other thing that is fantastic to see here in Ubuntu 20.04 is the Do Not Disturb button there by default. That used to be one of the first extensions that I would install, so it's great to see that it's here and it's present, ready to roll. Now, here's where we go deep in the weeds with Ubuntu specific stuff, and that is when it comes to software installation. So about 10 minutes in, here we're getting to the good stuff. Now, I've got some great things and I've got some average things that I want to talk about. First of all, I have very complicated feelings about package management on Linux in general. And for the most part, I do love universal packaging formats, whether that is Snap, Flatpak, AppImage, or whatever else that people are cooking up. I'm kind of all for it. However, the experience of installing snaps on the Ubuntu desktop is a bit of a two-edged sword at the moment. The reason I say that is because in Ubuntu 20.04, the default decision is to have the software manager tool here that you use to install your software. By default, is itself a snap package. Now, before everyone gets irate in the comments for Canonical forcing and the Ubuntu desktop team forcing snaps upon us, I actually think it makes great logical sense. Hear me out. So when you have a software center, such as the GNOME software center, it is very much tied to the desktop that it ships with. For example, the version of software that ships with GNOME 3.36 is, of course, GNOME 3.36 Software Center. For good, or for bad, or for worse. This means whatever bugs shipped with the GNOME Software Center, you're kind of stuck with that. And for a operating system that's going to be supported for many years to come, I would much rather have a software center that is going to be updated, revved, and polished over time. Now, at the current state of things, the Snap Store itself, as an App Store program, is a few versions behind the current GNOME Software Center. I hope this makes sense. I hope I'm tracking with everyone here. But the good news is that they can actually just push an update that solves bugs on the Snap Store much easier than they can the GNOME Software Manager that ships with GNOME 3.36 and is tied to the desktop. Now, on the flip side, it does mean that by default, your experience of installing software is going to be limited to either the Ubuntu repositories or the Snap Store. And by default, it will prefer to install things from the Snap Store. Now, again, I think this is a wonderful thing because snaps on the whole make more sense. For a desktop user that wants to have up-to-date applications that roll over and get the latest stable release in the background without them having to go out and fiddle around, without having to worry about downloading oodles of packages again and again, the technological wonder of universal packaging in Flatpak and Snap is just too good to argue with for the average user. Now, for the Linux power user, it bristles our feathers a little bit. I don't know if you can say that, but I'm saying it. It bristles your feathers a little bit. And this is because you feel, for the first time in your life, you feel kind of limited out of the box with what you can install. Of course, this decision could be reversed if Flatpak support was also enabled in the Snap Store out of the box by default. Is that going to happen? I kind of doubt it. And it would be counterintuitive for Canonical, who has invested so much research and development, time and effort into making a universal packaging system for it to. And by the way, got to enjoy these font issues here. You've got to realize that the amount of R&D that Canonical has put into making snaps work and the technological marvels that they have within them works really well in the server space. It works really well in the desktop space for the most part, with a few caveats, and it keeps getting better. And the iterative nature of snaps suits the desktop operating system paradigm so much better than packages that are tied down to the system's stability. Not only that, but I think the security, the ability for publishers to update their applications, it just makes so much sense in my mind. But I can't help but feel a little bit limited out of the box when I can't choose between whether I want to get software from the repositories, from FlatHub, or from the Snap Store. So, personal rant over, but On a very practical level, the Snap Store does have some performance issues, but with the hope of it being updated in the future, this might not necessarily be a thing that hangs around forever. The performance issues that I experience with the Snap Store can also be replicated for the most part here in the GNOME software store. Just how long it takes to search the software store. I mean, look how long we're hanging around waiting for Skype. Then when we do get Skype, we get a bunch of weird packages as well as 2 different versions of the Skype thing. Now I realize I've kind of stitched myself up because I have the Skype version from the Snap Store installed, but then you can also go and check out the one from FlatHub or from the repositories itself. So yeah, there's a few issues here that I have with GNOME Software Center, and in the absence of those being fixed on the GNOME desktop side, I'm hoping that they'll be fixed in the Snap Store itself. That was a long rant. Conclusion: GNOME Software and the Snap Store are both slow. They both need optimizations, but I'm more hopeful that the Snap Store will get fixed and updated, possibly quicker than the other one. If you want a GUI to be able to manage Flatpaks, repository software, and Snap packages, then go and get the GNOME Software Center from the Ubuntu repositories, and you'll be fine. You can add Flatpak support. Snap support is out of the box. No worries. All right, so on that note, let's talk about the software that I have installed. So AnyDesk for remote desktop support for family and others. Actually, let's just jump to the app view here so we can kind of go through it this way. I've installed the App Image Launcher, which is basically just a really great way to integrate app images into the desktop itself. I've installed Mumble for all of your chat room stuff. Not that I hang out there too much, but I'm looking to do that a bit more. I've installed SimpleNote from the Snap Store. I've installed P3X OneNote, which is basically an Electron OneNote wrapper from the Snap Store. I've installed Kdenlive which is my video editor of choice. I've installed that from FlatHub. I've got OBS Studio from FlatHub as well. Chromium, which by default is a Snap package, is there to handle all of my web apps such as Office.com and others. I've got the official Microsoft Teams app because that's what I use at school for teaching and communicating, collaborating, all that kind of thing. And I've got the Zoom app via Snap as well. It's not an official one, but it's pretty close to the original source. And I've got VMware somewhere here, maybe. Did I install it? I can't even remember if I did. I've downloaded it, haven't installed it, as my virtualization tool of choice, and GNOME boxes to back me up just in case. Now, what I do want to say about app distribution is that overall, I think that places like the Elementary App Center, they have a much more streamlined and elegant approach to managing third-party apps such as Flatpak integration, and also they have a much better model for being able to pay developers for the work that they do. There's a lot of software in the Snap Store, but it's very difficult for developers to get paid for any of the work in a pay-what-you-want model in the current environment. I'm kind of hoping that eventually the Snapcraft and the Snap Store integrate some method of being able to give developers a bit of a kickback for the work that they do, but for right now, I feel like KDE Discover, the KDE software manager, is more robust and more full of features than what GNOME software and inherently the Snap Store is, and I feel like Elementary's App Center is much more streamlined, much more performant, and it makes more sense when sideloading applications from FlatHub. Now, another thing that I did was I added Microsoft fonts from my Windows install, just copied them over and tried to edit a config file so that I could try and fix some of the font rendering issues when it comes to Microsoft fonts. Because when it comes to using OneNote, oftentimes the fonts look horrible within a lot of web browsers, Firefox included. Still haven't fixed the Firefox side of things, but for now, OneNote looks okay in Chromium and Electron-based applications. The last things that I've done in terms of system tweaks and that is I've installed Synology Drive, which is basically my NAS cloud storage, which is also synchronized with my OneDrive because I use OneDrive elsewhere. I removed a few applications, specifically Thunderbird. I just don't like Thunderbird, and I don't use it as an email client. I use MailSpring. I've set up calendar sync with the native GNOME calendar, but I had to install the Evolution-EWS package in order to be able to get that support on the back end to support my Microsoft Online account, and it ends up looking like an Exchange account. So that is what it is. It's not ideal, but it's not terrible either. One criticism that I have of the Yaru theme is that in dark mode, and I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but in dark mode, when you enable dark mode, the GNOME shell itself doesn't actually turn dark, in that these drop downs are still bright white. So when you've been used to seeing the rest of the screen dark, these are really jarring. So I don't know if they can, like, whether that's an intentional decision or whether that's coming in a future thing, but it'd be great to see these GNOME shell pop-ups be dark as well, because the universal dark theme just kind of lends itself to that, right? Am I right? I don't know. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about before I wrap this video up, and it's pretty long already, is ZFS. ZFS is a fantastic technological wonder when it comes to a file system. However, I'm dual booting with a Windows 10 install. I've got a few different partitions here on this drive, so using ZFS doesn't work in my specific example. But the fact that this, on a technological level, is built into the Ubuntu system now means that you have excellent rollback support, albeit a little bit obscured in the grub menu. But anytime you install a large amount of packages or a system update or something like that, a snapshot is made at a very small cost to disk space, etc. And you can roll back to that release should anything, you can roll back to that snapshot should anything break after a system update or a package install or whatever. And this paves the way for a fantastic backup solution to be offered in future Ubuntu releases. I can't remember if I overheard a conversation between, I don't know, Popey and Martin about whether or not this was going to happen, but it kind of sounded like it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the end of this Ubuntu 20.04 thoughts, workflow, setup, tour, mashup thing. This is what I'm working with at the moment, and I'll continue to work with it for a while, and I'll be testing different distributions from within this operating system, probably in boxes or VMware or whatever. And if something really tickles my fancy, then I'll switch to it like any good distro hopper should. But in the meantime, I really like what I see. Ubuntu 20.04 is a fantastic iteration and fantastic representation of what the GNOME desktop is capable of in 2020. And in my opinion, this is the most Ubuntu-ish release that we have had since the Ubuntu desktop returned to the GNOME desktop, shipping it by default since they abandoned Unity. The theming looks great. Everything looks very coherent. Performance is definitely up there with the best. And those who don't like Ubuntu and the direction it's going will continue to ignore it. But the sheer market share and the sheer pull that Canonical has as a self-sustaining open source Linux company is pretty exciting, and it's great to have such a wonderful desktop made by such wonderful people. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comments. Subscribe, notifications, and follow me on Twitter at InGalactic. And thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.